have quite a bit to talk about, but I don't really have much time to myself, so I'll see what I can get through. Last night, I didn't have any trouble falling asleep. Actually, when I was falling asleep, I felt something shift and click, and I felt like I was floating. And before that happened, I saw a friend of mine in my mind's eye from California, and his smile just radiated to me, and I smiled back, and I felt that energy of our connection, and I just felt like I was sort of one with him and his consciousness. And he's such a wonderful friend that I haven't thought too much of because I forget everything. But he was just so there and present with me, and I felt like I was floating and one. And then at something like 3:30 in the morning, I had that scary heart thing happen where I wake up and it was this sense of panic, I would call it. And if I were in California, it might be something that would make me take a Seroquel. But since I'm at home, I got up and I took a vitamin C, a lipospheric vitamin C packet, and then I put on some Krishnamurti audio and just listened to that and fell back asleep. And yesterday I was doing some reading, and I was thinking about how before I was ever labeled with a mental illness, I was in this kind of process for 2 months, and at some point eventually I couldn't handle it. And that might happen again, but I'm seeing that in all the years leading up to that transformation that was turned into a mental illness, I was doing all that kind of reading. And then I got transformed into mental illness, so I've been focusing and reading and learning about different perspectives and talking about this along the way. But I realized yesterday, if it was a transformation process, I need to start reading about some of these maps of transformation again, because I've been spending a lot of time making my own context and meaning in order to move myself out of the mental health paradigm, but I'm sort of lost in my own map making process. And there are other maps for transformation. And I don't know if that's what's happening for sure, but I'd rather assume that than assume that it's returning symptoms of a mental illness. So I spent some time reading the book 1000 by Ramaji yesterday, and it was quite helpful. And it talks about non-duality, and I don't even know exactly what that means, but the thing I've been talking about with having the sense of being one with everything yet separate at the same time feels sort of like this non-duality paradox. So yeah. And then at the same time, reading the Ramaji book 1000, he talks about certain people and why they're at certain levels of consciousness. And you'd have to read the book to understand what I'm saying, but 600 is enlightenment. And some people don't really cross that barrier, but they're able to speak about their enlightenment experiences. But they don't necessarily become enlightened, but they're able to speak about their enlightenment experiences, and people might think they're enlightened, but they're not. They might even kind of think they're enlightened, but they had enlightenment experiences. And he's saying in the book, there's nothing wrong with that. That serves a certain purpose. Like he talks about A Course in Miracles and how it's a thought-based system, so it's not quite at the level of enlightenment. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a higher level than the lower levels. And he gave other examples. He gave an example of the writer who writes for Ramana Maharshi, and how that person isn't enlightened, but they're able to translate what Ramana Maharshi was saying. So they were serving a certain purpose. So in seeing that and in reading that, I feel like whatever level I'm stuck at right now, which I think it's between 575 and 585 and maybe fluctuating. And I probably have gone over the hump at some point. I think I did. all those years ago before I was diagnosed. But I think that it destabilized on purpose so that I would create all this and see that a lot of people are having these types of enlightenment experiences, but then being really, really destabilized. And I also feel that an enlightenment type experience, maybe it's not even enlightenment, of something like so-called mania can be a mechanism that's turned on as a result of somebody being in a post-traumatic state or depressed state for a prolonged time. And then even somebody, if they're in a depressed state for a prolonged time, then they take antidepressants. The antidepressants can apparently trigger someone to go into mania and then develop something like bipolar. So there's something about being down and traumatized and depressed for so long. We can only take it for so long. So there's this enlightenment type experience. Maybe it's not that, but it's a little glimpse. It's like a glimpse of grace, of being free of all of that temporarily, so we at least know that it's possible. But at the same time, most of us don't have the maps and the spiritual groundwork to allow that to stabilize. So we move around in chaos. So this could, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm in a certain level of consciousness for a reason. Part of the reason is because I've talked myself to this point. So perhaps having a different understanding of my being and the connectedness to everything, and perhaps this next part is a little bit about, well, okay, I've moved outside the mental health framework, but how do I transcend and transform into, I'll call it enlightenment. I don't really know. Because I feel like right now, being around my family, that's a level of consciousness that's not enlightenment. So I don't know if that can happen here, or if I'm supposed to learn how to be around family, because a lot of people who get diagnosed with a mental illness end up living with their family. So if I can navigate this for a while and then transform, that could be helpful for people. So what I'm saying is, the level of consciousness I'm at is to be of service to others. If I was meant to be enlightened right now and sitting under a tree somewhere warm, I would be, but I'm not. I'm sort of in the next trap of being around family. And it's not a trap. It's the way it is. They mean well. I've seen signs these last few days. They really, really do mean well and are trying to be helpful and kind. So it's not that they're being unkind at all. It could be my wanting to get on with it and move into this enlightenment, which makes it, and I haven't even been thinking about it in that way at all, like enlightenment, but I'm attempting to think in that way, because if I don't put some kind of spiritual aspiration in there, then I could easily get trapped again in the mental health system. So if I can frame it, because a lot of what I've done along the way is reframe, if I can reframe this stuff along those lines, then it could be quite beneficial for me. So this also could show that it's really important for people to be at a respite away from family when transitioning off meds, because family, if they don't really understand what's happening, like it's some kind of transformation that might happen, then it can lead to well-meaning people funneling somebody back into the mental health system. And I'm seeing that's what is happening. I'm in a situation that I kind of have to be here at the moment. I want to take the business course, which is grounded in reality. Because if I don't create something grounded in reality, I could easily be ungrounded. And that heart thing last night was really scary. My brain gets this sense that I know too much, and so I need to die. I need to end my life. That was the feeling. And that sounds kind of conspiracy-ish or paranoid, but it doesn't feel paranoid. It feels like, poof, it just happens. I just jump out of bed and feel like this is the end. But then I read something helpful in the 1000 book by Ramaji. And it was really fascinating to read this because I was talking with myself about this kind of thing, and he talks about it in his book. So it is, again, I talk about something and then I read something and I find the confirmation of that, not the other way around, not studying the book and then deciding to overlay the pattern that somebody else has told me to think over it. When one discovers for oneself, the universe somehow allows us to make the discovery first and then gives us a little sign of confirmation after, instead of the seeking. It's the discovering and then the seeing of that which one discovered as some kind of confirmation of being on the right kind of track. So what the book 1000 talks about is so important. I might even contact this Ramaji person, because to think that I can do this next part on my own might be a bit silly. I might need some help from people who have walked this path before. And this book 1000 by Ramaji, I quite recommend to people who are struggling, because it might provide a bit of a map to what's happening here. It illustrates it quite well. So I feel like people like us need to learn these things, otherwise we interpret everything as a mental illness. And part of the so-called mental illness is the way society's structured, so it's really hard to transform within the structure. And since I'm pretty sure I'll be within this structure for the next couple of months, I need to learn how to not break out of the cocoon yet, not metamorphose. And if I do, it'll probably look like I'm freaking out, because the context around me is ready to put me back in the mental health system. So if something does happen, I would likely be better off doing that myself, medicating myself with a Seroquel myself and not saying anything to my family, than letting them know, because that will put all of that image and worry and everything onto it. And that's exactly what I've been trying to avoid by talking to myself on video and not telling anyone, because what people think will warp it. At least that's what I'm thinking. And along with that, I got confirmation that I have unlimited private embedding, so I'm going to work on that stuff in the next couple weeks, along with what I have to do. And hopefully I can get through it, because that was kind of scary last night. But I'll share what the book 1000 says about this in the next video. And I also listened to a talk by Dion Vimal. I used to study with him a little bit. Totally lost contact. I think he let me figure things out on my own, possibly. And the Ramaji book mentions that. He mentions before he settled into 1000 level consciousness, his guru person disappeared on him. So I feel like that's kind of what happened. And who knows? I might plan a trip to meet up with that being again one day.